said, tell me about the relationship that you had with your manager or with your client. And I said, that is very insightful. It's one of the most insightful things because you cannot do work in an organization as an internal or as an external unless you have a relationship of credibility and trust. Period. If they don't like you, they don't trust you even more. If they don't trust you, and if they don't have an open communication process with you, meet regularly and talk about what's going on, then you're dead in the water. And they've also got to have confidence in your approach. I don't care if your approach is called Mildred. It's a new theory on organization change. It's if they can understand your Mildred theory of change and they agree with it and support it, then you've got an oar in the water. You can start to make some changes. But if you don't, it's not going to happen. And so just one more thing I'd say, and that is that I heard a lot of really good ideas. What I challenged people to do in the breakout sessions here was to not to come up with a whole comprehensive strategy in 5 minutes, but what are some things that you would attack? What are some things that you would target for change? Right? And people got it. They said flatten the structure, team-based, create better middle management positions, provide opportunities for growth for employees, that sort of thing. There are some key elements that are absolutely part of a total culture change project. Getting people engaged and empowering them and getting them involved in the conversation, stuff like that. So there are a lot of brilliant ideas. You don't have enough time in 15 minutes to formulate a strategy, but there are some people were firing on all cylinders. It was good.
Great. So,
yeah, so I'll go. So they actually formulated that in my 15 minutes.
Wow.
What were you doing in yours?
we implemented the strategy.
We're not competitive at all. No, I mean, I heard some really good things, one of which, came from the newer students in that, how are we looking at how we onboard people, right? As it's a great opportunity to be able to introduce the values, if that's what you're trying to preserve, all the good pieces and parts. How are you interviewing for them? How are you selecting for them? And how are you just doing the whole onboarding experience? Of which I'm looking at that as well. The interesting thing about this is that I'm working this in real time, so it isn't a past and what could I have done differently. So I love that all the ideas that you all shared with me. And what I am doing as a first step is to do focus groups. And I know that some of you all came up with that idea. It's like, how do we find out what's really going on? So thankfully, they're bought into that strategy as a place to start to really look at all of the different levels of the organization. So I'm asking questions that are above the iceberg and below the iceberg to really understand what is the issue? What does it feel like to be a leader here? If you're an employee, what does it feel like for you as an employee, and what do you need from your leaders? What's communication like? So really getting at all levels so that I can get an understanding in addition to what I've observed and what people have told me. And the thing with being an external consultant is that you have to be able to gain trust quickly and be credible, but also meet them where they're at. So, this being a media company, they're not looking for something complicated. They're not looking for anything too heavily theory-based. They are new to this. So, I quickly assess that and I'm able to say, here's a strategy, here's a way that we can start. You really get an understanding of what's going on. You have a good sense, but we need to find out. So, does that answer?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jim, what are some of the cool ideas you heard?
So what was interesting was in my case study that who said it? I'm going to call you out because it was such a good comment. I think you had a Brazilian accent or with her kid. Okay. Her kid was drawing on the board. She had a great comment. She said, well, I would approach your situation in an upper level and a lower level. So I think you have a situation where there's a culture change that needs to take place, and that's a longer term proposition. And then you've got immediate process issues that have to get resolved. And so there's a process and training proposition as well. And that I would tackle them both But I would start off with training in the process piece because you have to sort of shore up the problem first and show that you can make progress and
Down the road, there will be coaching. Down the road, there will be more in terms of revamping their onboarding process. But I've got it kind of tiered so that we can attack what's the most pressing need. Focus groups, leadership development, and then we'll add on to that. One of the things that we talked about after one of the group rotations is that, you know, the concept of a burning need. What's their pain point? And I thought that was a really good comment. However, you know, could they be that much? Could there be an awareness for needing to get at this before there's a big pain point, before there's a, you know, it's gonna hurt the pocket, and so are those cases successful? I'd like to think so, that they are at least self-aware enough to get at it before, you know, their shows are, you know, not making money, or before there's actual turnover to the extent that people are leaving and fleeing the company. But we'll see. You know, we have to get at that, but also what is success going to look like in this?
Yeah, the appreciative inquiry approach suggests you don't need to feel a pain. In fact, if you feel pain, you're going to focus on problems. If you focus on problems, you're going to come up with negative solutions and maybe even be paralyzed by the pain, the fear, and whatever other negative emotions are floating around people's heads. So that's an interesting dichotomy we have in our culture, that you could go the excited, inspired route of appreciative inquiry and not have to have a pain point in order to go through change. And other people say, in order to go through change, people have to hit rock bottom and get hurt and beat up and all that. Yeah.
But I like to say yes and because the thing when it comes down to an organization spending money, and so is this hurting them enough to spend the money that they're going to need to spend in order to do this intervention, versus you're already in this, as a consultant, you're in the system already, and the person and your key stakeholder or your sponsor is saying, we need to, you know, there's something going on here, we need to get to the root cause, and then if you do an appreciative inquiry, they're already invested, they're putting their money where their mouths are. Whereas this scenario, I'm not so sure if they say it's a good idea. You may give them appreciative inquiry, but they may say, well, okay, I get that, but do I want to spend the money on it right now? But if there's a pain associated with it, then they might be more apt to spend the money. And that's just more of a sales tactic. So, I mean, a sales opportunity. Yeah. For those external consultants out there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Jim, what's the reveal for you?
Well, I guess I have to couch this by saying I had been at this company for 2 years when I was given the project to change the culture of the IT division. If I know we're not at this question yet. If I could go back and do it over, I would do it quite differently than how I did. At the same time, I think there were some things that we did that were good. We tackled the problem in two parts, just like I was mentioning in the debrief. One was the process training and the clarifying of the process for the software development lifecycle. So that what we did is I partnered with the quality manager and we built out a flow chart of their entire software development process. And we included in there, it was 1.9 in the flow chart was change management. And then so they all projects had to go through my department, and we had to counsel them on questions like, what are the impacts of the change you're about to make on end users in the company? And so they all had to go through that part of the process in order to graduate from the alpha stage to the beta stage for software rollout. For some of you who don't speak software, you don't know I think what I'm saying is really boring. For some of you, like Daniel, you're like, oh, this is cool. I can see him like he's not and then we trained everyone on the new process, and we got all the senior directors and the VPs on board that they were going to enforce this process and how we can do how things were going to be done in going forward. We're going to follow this process and this training. on the culture side, that's where if I could go back and do it over, I would hire someone like Sony or Chris to come in and help me because I did the best I could. And actually, I brought in, I don't know if you all might or might not know Jonathan Gottlieb. He was one of the associate professors up in the San Francisco CSPP. I'm going to keep calling it CSPP.
We don't mind.
And him and Ira Levin, I had them help me out, and he did a whole proposal, and I brought it to Gino, and Gino first said he was going to pay for it, then he decided not to pay for it. He said, "Jim, you can just do it yourself." So, to your question, how much did Gino support the culture change? That tells you a lot right there. So I did the best I could. I did a culture committee. I had all the senior directors on the committee. We called ourselves the Culture Club, which let's throw back, sing the song, leading singer, and all that stuff. So we would talk, and we met once a week. And every Wednesday afternoon we would meet and we would talk about the culture. And I had a process that I put them through to assess the culture and how it's going and communications and process and whatnot. And what we didn't do was what I liked about kind of what Chris and Zoe were saying is get in there and do focus groups and really understand the business. I think you were saying too, like, what's the connection between IT and the business people? How do we get the IT people to know more of the pain of the business people and whatnot? And we didn't do that. And so one of the benefits of the Culture Club was it was fun. We had fun together. All the senior directors, they didn't get along at all these guys. So part of the problem was that the directors didn't like each other because they weren't led by a good leader. And so the Culture Club was able to create an environment where they got to know each other and talk and feel like they're all one team. It was the first time they'd ever done that. So that was good. We made some small changes, and that was good. But what we should have done, if I could go back, is I would get someone senior in there, and I would go in and I'd say, look, the IT organization has to go and meet the rest of the business, and they've got to get closer to the business so they understand when I'm making these changes, what's the impact. Likewise, the business has got to be a little more appreciative and understanding for the challenges in the IT department. So we need a lot of effort in that way. And Gino just didn't have Gino was the sponsor, and he just didn't have the leadership to kind of drive that the way that it could have been driven. I wouldn't say that it should have been driven.
Thank you. So, are there any questions that people have about what actually happened and what worked and what didn't? And you'd like to raise your hand and ask because there's a special something burning in you that you want to ask that question.
Well,
And then Mike.
I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about time constraints, right? Because projects can go, what you can describe as the socio-technical approach can take years, right? Or you might have, I want this done in 9 days. So
I've never agreed with those. Well, there are always time constraints. The biggest challenge is to get the client to agree to cough up time of people in their organization to do the work to get to the result, to get to the solution. And in this particular case, I was very fortunate in that I had a general manager of that division who was very supportive and absolutely understood not only the business need to get down costs and improve employee engagement, but he gave latitude of freedom to his managers to do it the way that they saw fit. And he also was fortunate enough that he had the confidence in me to be able to support his internal management team, because I worked with the controller on this project. I did it with the director of engineering on a couple of other projects. And so it's the confidence to say, I'm going to cough up. This design team met 1 day a week for 6 hours. No, I'm sorry. At one time it was 2 days a week for 6 hours a day. They had an hour in the morning to do their own work, and then an hour in the evening to emails and all that stuff. But he coughed up that resource, and we started out 2 days a week, and then went to 1 day a week over the course of 8 weeks to do the redesign. The redesign ended up in a solution that said this is pretty much what we need to do. The implementation of that is what took months because it required some other interventions that weren't as time consuming.
So I think whether you're internal or external, the conversation to have is how long it will take. And the it is, depending on what that appetite is, right? So one of the things that I do as an external is just say, hey, something like this will take time. And by that I mean, if we start with a focus group and build on this, this, and this, it may take 6 months to a year or more, to gauge what their appetite is for that. And it also allows you to do that dance of like, do I want to take on this work? Do they have the appetite? Do I have the commitment to gauge all of that? And you do that even as an internal as well. And I remember an instance when I was an internal at a large entertainment company or consumer products division in which, the journey is still going for them even after I've left that company. And it's been probably 3 years now. And this is top to bottom culture change where the president is really bought onto it. She's spearheading this effort. So, it could take that long, or if you get the sense as an external or internal that they don't want that whole kit and caboodle, how do you have that conversation of, this is what you're going to get. You're only giving me 6 months. So I think it's, being able to have that conversation and really laying it up front to say, if you want this, this is what you're going to get.
Just a quick question for you. Have you found also that it helps to chunk it up a little bit? So we're going to do an assessment phase, and then we'll make a decision at that point?
Yeah, I mean,
Are you gonna go on or not?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's typically how I propose it. Let's start with this first,
Yeah.
and reassess where we're at, and then add on.
When we were doing your case in this room, I remember you mentioned how you retained this client, but I'm curious to know what are your thoughts on how you approach what good looks like, and being that you're kind of chunking it out, how does that conversation go?
In terms of what?
What good looks like, or like the end point, right?
Yeah, and I think that one of the things I said is that I don't know that they know yet what that looks like, and so that's why the focus group plays an even more critical role to say, like, here's what your employees are saying. And I chose focus group intentionally because I'm a keen believer of, I take a lot in by how people behave in the room. So are they not saying stuff? Are they? And I chose that over an online survey for a reason, because I think, again, those nonverbals say a lot about that culture or the verbals. So it's the question being,
Essentially, again, you're chunking out the
Yeah.
work, and it's like, yeah, you have these, you're checking in as you go along.
Yeah.
How do you retain someone to say, like, okay, we're headed somewhere,
yeah.
and not define that clearly? Just, I guess I just don't have exposure to the level of discomfort that I'm kind of assuming, I guess.
Because you don't have the North Star yet. Yeah, and so that focus group plays a role to say, like, here's what the baseline is, what the palpable culture is currently. If you want to get it here, let's talk about it. Know what this is. We have the results. Where do you want it to go? So that's kind of how I'm shaping this current case, if you will, because they don't even know what's working well right now. So they don't have a basis.
I guess, kind of from start of career to where you're at now, is that being crunched?
So yes, I have a specific case that I'm thinking of where over the summer I was engaged with a client who was looking to do culture change, starting with the leadership team. There's a lot of, I would say 60% of the leadership team was new in the past 2 years. So you can imagine that there was a lot of kind of tension between the old guard and the new guard, and who are these new folks, and are they living the values? So there's just a lot of discourse around, like, we're not all aligned. So, I started by way of doing one-on-one interviews of, like, what is their experience, and asking all the questions. Midway through, they let go of the COO, who was supposed to be the second in charge. Right? Change happens, it's disruption. And so for me, it's, okay, now this looks different. How do I shift with you, the client? Are your needs different? What is the culture, or what do these interviews serve, and how do we use it in a way that will benefit going forward? So it's literally pivoting in the moment, because they told me but didn't tell me that they were going to make this move. So once I found out, I'm like, okay, we need to change direction. And ultimately, they decided that they didn't want to keep going down the road of change. So as an external, I'm like, okay, it's clear to me that you don't want to do the work. You let go of the COO, so you're on a different path. So we parted ways.
So, Chris, to date, those of us who remember Peter's Water, in fact, in the mid-80s, they also created the 7S model.
That was what I was thinking of, the 7S model.
Oh, okay.
Rockwell adapted it to 8 levers of change.
Okay, got it. So anyway, that model is, for those of you who weren't maybe born yet, was around, was around this core concept of shared value. And we talked about that here, right? That really are fundamental to really driving culture change. And so much of culture change efforts tend to be around either creating a vision of what those values are, if they don't exist today, and then looking for ways to move the people through a process by either implementing systems, changes, structure changes to get there. 2 weeks ago, there was another ETD event on the West Side, and we had a chance to have Jenny Wong, another one of our colleagues, that was there, Sherry and I were there as well, who really had a kind of a different, an interesting twist on how to achieve culture change. She said it's possible to do it by not even crafting that vision, right? But instead starting with systems and structures that are designed to get people to behave in ways in line with the culture change.
Yep.
And rather than thinking, well, let's win their hearts and minds first, and then create the structures and processes to get there. Her thinking was, and she shared a couple of examples of how do you create the systems and processes that drive the behavior change, and as people embrace those behaviors, then their hearts and minds follow.
Which is, if you've ever tried to quit smoking, is exactly what happens.
Exactly.
If you try to convince somebody to quit smoking by changing their attitudes and beliefs, it's very difficult. You need to change the behavior, and then later they say, "Oh, I hate smoking."
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a different kind of an interesting approach to how you think about change management, because I think the hearts and minds stuff is admirable, the shared value stuff is great, but this seems hard.
You're following the principles of applied behavioral science.
Absolutely.
By Emerson Barlow Emerson years ago. Yeah. Sorry.
And also to Jim, our IT department in our company has been trying to go through a change as well, and they took that same approach. They did a reorg course first, and they created, just like those of us who work in HR, the concept of HR business partners. They did IT business partners and embedded them in the business with some accountabilities around their own incentives to satisfy the customer. And what you saw is behavior change that really drove a more truly customer-centered focus around IT solutions, which, and again, it's still pretty early, which I think they hope will drive the culture change looking forward down the road.
Well, it's a perfect transition to what I was going to say, which is I agree with the approach that they're taking. It sort of fits my style a little bit. How do I put this? I want to put this in a way that doesn't offend anybody, so I'll do my best. I worry sometimes about the culture change meetings. That oftentimes they stay too high level, and they almost are in conversations in the ether. And how does it actually play out? So just to your point about, what change are you really trying to get in the behavior of people? And when you get to that place where you really do understand what it looks like, that specific behavior looks like. So what we wanted was ultimately Gino or whatever, whoever it is, says, I want culture change. That's not really he's not really asking for the Edgar Schein, I want an analysis of the culture. And then if you go take that approach with someone like that, you're misaligned. And that's why he ultimately didn't pay for Jonathan's proposal. Probably my fault, because I was too junior to know how to guide Jonathan in the different direction. But what I thought we did well was we developed what we call the PLC, which is the project lifecycle, and it was a very specific set of steps that they had to take. And within that was user assessment steps that they had to do, and the project managers, IT project managers, they liked that because they felt like it's really concrete. So I've got a template I fill out, which is called impact assessment, organizational impact assessment. Every change I fill out, who are the users who are affected, exactly how are they affected, and then do I need training or communications based on the user group for that change. And they had to review that with the directors who we would meet then throughout the project life cycle. They had to meet in there were 4 stages, and they couldn't release to the next stage until all the directors agreed they had done all the activities in that stage. So stage 1, 1.9 being the change management stage, before they wanted to get to stage 2, they had to get agreement from all the directors that they'd done 1.9. And I would be in the room and I would have to say, yeah, they worked with my team and they've done that. So it's very, in that culture, sort of an engineering, and even more within engineering, IT engineering, they really want a process and tactical approach. On the other hand, what I think we, like I alluded to before, what I think we missed the opportunity of is really kind of getting them into business. And like your IT project managers, you're embedding them throughout, which is an interesting idea. Well, I used to run recruiting at a wonderful company, and I put some of the recruiters in with the businesses that they recruit for. So they would actually, I said 1 day a week you have to sit with your business. You set up a cubicle so you could sit there with them. So they get to know you and they have lunch with you or coffee or they talk to you. And that would help a lot. But again, my bias in OD is this tactical change, kind of like what Chris said about smokers. Changing culture is really hard. And kind of why it's referred to as this big, huge iceberg is it seems so overwhelming. But how can you chip off the iceberg a little bit with little behavioral changes and say, yeah, this is what we want. Now we got to prioritize because we can't just change people completely. So we got to say, okay, we want these 100 changes, but the top 5, if they just do these things, we'll be really happy because that'll account for 50% of the issues, or 60, or whatever. So I don't know. It's an interesting discussion. I don't say that I'm right. It just tends to be my bias is on sort of the leadership and the training and the behavioral changes that we're trying to get at.
I want to thank the 3 of you for coming out and regaling us with stories and lessons learned, with answers to people's questions, and also with lots of invitations for people to share your creative ideas and try them out and hear how they might have gone. And I hope that kind of laboratory where you can share ideas and do some thought experiments with people who can think through how would they go, and having people in the rows of seats who also can think about how they will go has been a really rich and fascinating evening. I know I've enjoyed it. You all look like you've enjoyed it, and I hope everybody here enjoyed it as well.